Going on, my friends? I'm Rick, and this is your seat at the table. And we are now looking at yet another review of my BattleTech Mech Warrior collection. And this is House Kurita, the Draconis Combine from BASA. One of the things that the House series, like I said, these are great, awesome books. Once again, this is also one that's having some border or some issues with its pages, and so I have a tendency, like I said in previous videos, I store them in a plastic bag in order to keep the pages intact so they don't just up and migrate away. This book was, let's see, when was it published? In, I want to say it was the late 80s. Yeah, 1987. When I purchased this brand new from the game store, it cost me $15. And just yesterday, day before yesterday, the wife and I went out and we stopped at the local game store called Mayhem Comics. And I had been doing a lot of BattleTech, and I've also been reading novels in my spare time and before I go to bed. I just finished this one a couple days ago and started the next volume 2 in the series, and it's kind of, I don't know, reignited my love of this particular genre and this particular game universe. And so I've been, there's a big section that's missing in my collection and knowledge and up until the current point. And so I've been trying to find a ways. I don't know. I went out. You know, this is just me being nostalgic and old. I went to Barnes and Noble. The only actual bookstores left in the Greater Des Moines area is Barnes and Noble, and they have two locations, and one at the mall, and one at the standalone book and the store. It's pretty good size, and I went in there remembering the old days when they used to when there used to be a half dozen different bookstores and stuff, and this is before the internet and things like this. The idea of being able to go in and pick up something and look at it and read it at the store a little bit to decide whether or not it's worth investing your money in is different from trying to get something off the internet, because you can order things off the internet, and if you don't, you take a risk that they're not what you think they are, and once you buy it, it's just not, it's you just ate the money for something you may have not really wanted, or you have to go through the hassle of trying to return it, and in some aspects it's not worth the hassle and the trouble and the expense, and you just have to eat it. So when you're budget conscious like myself, you have to be real cautious as to what you spend money on. So I went out and I was able to acquire this, and I'm going to do a video on it shortly. And this is the Dark Age era source book, so it's going to fill a big gap. So this is circa 3025 when this is put out, and this is 3145. So we're looking at 110 years between this and this. And there's an area, this was an area that I completely blanked out for a number of reasons when I was playing and collecting and buying and stuff back in the day, and now I'm kind of trying to play catch up. Anyway, so we're looking at House Kurita. House Kurita, I always called it House Kurita, so if I have a tendency to do that, that's why. It's always been how I read and understood it to be pronounced. It wasn't until many decades later that we had social media and stuff where people out there were going, well, this is House Liao. Liao, I always call it Leo as an Leo, because that's how I pronounced it. Well, that's not the proper pronunciation. It's Kurita. It's like Devon. I always call it Federated Sons House Devon, but it's House Davion. So it's, once I've heard other people, it gives me a little bit better insight as to what and why. So House Kurita, Draconis Combine is considered out of the 5 core Henry houses to be the second most powerful, second largest, perhaps not in territory, but second most potent force, and politically speaking and militarily speaking in the air, second only to the Federated Sons. But like all houses, it has some strengths, but it also has some weaknesses. Some of the weaknesses that House Kurita suffers from is they have this very strict-minded mindset of how things operate, so they lack a bit of creativity, they lack a bit of innovation, they lack a bit of individualism. So if in a military campaign, if the general in charge gets killed, the odds are really good that the whole campaign is going to come to a screeching halt, because there's this, nobody wants to step up and make the assumption that they're in command. And you get to the rank and file. The rank and file are not conditioned to think independently, to take risks, and because they don't want to risk their life by making the wrong mistake and then being asked to atone for it, or to make a presumption that could put them in a politically or socially bad light. This causes them some crippling issues in the field. It's just like their military. Their military mindset in some aspects is, we are a hammer, and we're going to hammer whatever it is we're going to attack. When we attack something, we're just going to hammer it till it goes away. And we're going to beat on it and beat on it, even to the point where it's detrimental to us. House Kurita has suffered many horrific victories over the centuries because of this mindset, this do or die, this all or nothing concept, and it really has a problem. And then, of course, while it puts a strong front forward to the outside and inner sphere, the internal workings of the society and its politics are very convoluted. There are many, many layers. And within those layers, there's a kind of an unspoken or even a spoken case system that also interferes with a lot of how things can be operated. Sometimes it takes longer to get things accomplished because of the political nicety, the small talk, the need to walk your way through a minefield, so to speak, to get things done. And sometimes it's not that simple, and sometimes it's complex. It's just like the current head of the house at Takashi Kurita at this time. One of his favored means of communicating to his generals and to his commanders is by using a haiku, a very small phrase that you better be able to interpret, because what he intends and what you do and what you results from that may not be what you thought it was. And if you don't succeed, and you're likely to get yourself in trouble. And we're back to that kind of vague stuff. Another problem the House Kurita has is its economy, and in the aspect that they are very disinclined to engage in economic converse with the rest of the inner sphere. They don't have a lot of things to export that anybody wants, and while they buy out, they will import a lot of things. This means that there's a lot of their hard currency goes outwards with very little coming back. So they're limited to what they can purchase and what they can buy. And resources can be a problem. Luxury goods can be a problem. Parts and certain things that they need are much harder to get for them. And the average citizen of House Kurita learn to live within their means, to live with what they have, and be creative with what they have within reason, but to have a much more austere lifestyle in some aspects. What this has also led to is a very well-established, very deep and rich underworld. So the Yakuza, for example, are very powerful and dominant in the lower end of society, and they're also a big conduit for a lot of, especially luxury items and small items to come in from the other houses, because of the complications and complexities of everything else set up in the house, right? So there's some good and the bad, and it comes in with some mixed problems. And as a house, it is, like I said, one of the more potent ones militarily speaking. But so the Draconis Combine is the warlike successor state located in the northeast quadrant of the inner sphere. History of the region is long and bloody one, dating back even before the formation of the Combine in 2319. For all apparent indications, the violence of this house will continue into the future. From the time of the Combine's foundings, its leaders have believed themselves destined to conquer all human space, a goal still to be achieved some 700 years later, and some 700 plus years and 3 succession wars later. Bordered by House Davion's Federated Sons on one side, House Steiner's Larian Commonwealth on the other, and a no man's land of the Periphery on the third, the Draconis Combine is surrounded by hostile forces. Till now, however, the balance of power among the rival successor houses have tipped to the favor of one over the other, blah, blah, blah. We'll get onto that. So, we get the history. Draconis Combine was founded in 2319 by Shiro Kurita, who used the persuasive statesmanship, treachery, and bloody military conquest to forge it from almost nothing. Raised in a military and social tradition dating back more than 6 centuries, Chihiro embraced and embodied the way of the warrior, i.e. Bushido. Although the personalness of his personality, he managed to become the leader of New Smakarad and then went on to form the group of petty kings and lords into the Galadon Alliance. This alliance was created to oppose the Great Azwa Mercantile Alliance, blah, blah. So, we got their early history, politics and technology. Second, it goes on, breaks the early 2000s and the Second Soviet Civil War in 2014. The Exodus from the Terra FTL ship exceeds expectations. Colonizing space, water shortages, expanses, and autonomy. Terran politics. And this is a good example of what goes on even today. When man goes anywhere, even into outer space, he takes all of his bad habits with him, even politics. Come to think of it, especially politics. Beginning of the end, Outer Reaches Rebellion, Declaration of Independence, the Terran hegemony. I keep trying, I'll get it pronounced eventually someday. From the ashes of political decisiveness, Terra rose once more like a proud phoenix. Its analogy holds true. Terra may one day rise again in political importance, capable of casting her shadow over House Kurita and the Draconis Combine. This is something we must not let happen, even if we are forced to attack Terra directly. ISF internal and memorandum from Theodore Kurita, Prince of Luthien, to Sabash Eridor, director of the ISF ComStar archive. Right. So, the birth of a dynasty. The Lance of Galadon, Show of Force, Political Maneuvers, Shiro the Conqueror, Growth of the Combine, Shiro Relents, War against Rasalhague. Said the Draconis Combine should not have chosen the dragon for its symbol. Instead, it should have taken for its standard the image of an octopus with all its venomous tentacles reaching throughout the northeast quadrant, sucking life from everything they touch. From the Wisdom of the Universe by Homer Kalagi, Explorer of Celestial Sphere Publications, 2821. The Principality of Razul. And I'm sorry if I not pronounced that right, because it is another tongue twister for me, no matter how hard I put it. 10 Isles Reign, Race of Arms, advances against Tamar Sky, control the Age of War. During the 25th century, death and destruction threatened the end of the human race. 10 states of the Inner Sphere rediscovered the arts of war anew with ever-improving weapons. Only Ares' convention is strict codes of battlefield honor save man from himself. Yet these same codes also foster the use of war to resolve every disagreement. Not since the height of the almost forgotten Terran Roman Empire had man fought so much for so little reason. Invention and widespread use of new multifunction weapon system known as the battle mech only added to this image. More importantly, it brought a zenith of war back from the most impersonal form of mass destruction to deliberate acts by individual combatants. Sin-filled murderers, if you will. How ironic that we come full circle. Once again, the greatest sport in the universe consisted of gladiatorial games. This barbaric caricature of life, no matter how carefully concealed or rationalized, proved that we were even more base than the animals. Unpublished diary entry by ComStar director Jerome Blake as revealed to Comrade Tayoma. So, Robert Parker Kurita advances against Tamar, turmoil and treachery, changing nature of war, the Von Rogers dynasty, battles in the Age of War, female heir, Star League era, preparations for war, the good years. I don't care what other people say. Peace is an unhealthy and unnatural state. It clogs the mind with a pretty pink haze of flowers and waterfalls. It thickens our stomachs with fat, makes us believe that we're all brothers under the skin. Peace, why it's only absolutely deadly condition for man, absolute, especially to a warrior. From an address by Coordinator Takashiro Kurita to Sun Zhang's Mech Warrior Academy, March 2695. Peace and progress, economic unification, the old ways, new ways, pulling up roots, resurgence of the ISF, death of the Star League, gutting of the Star League. Said many accounts portray Lord Kurita as the villain who orchestrated the fateful events following the Council Lord's appointment of General Alexander Krisky as Regent Protector under Simon Cameron's death. The theory is that Takashiro Kurita managed to persuade the other four lords of passing new rules and laws that pushed the teetering Star League over the edge. Each of the Council Lords were willful and strong, however, so we must assume that they equally share the blame. The misplaced trust, Stefan the Usurper into the darkness, First Succession War, Kentares V incident, or Kentares IV, the massacre. Yeah. Smoke rises from ruins, our mechs destroy and spit death at innocence shame. A haiku found on the body of a Kurita officer committed suicide during the Kentares massacre. After his father was killed, Jinjiro's becomes the coordinator of House Kurita, the Draconis Combine, and he basically orders the massacre of every living being on the planet Kentares for the out of spite and anger. Some 45 million people are slaughtered. It becomes a very big black mark in the history of the Draconis Combine, and also a warning to others that just how far House Kurita is willing to go and how much its military will actually conduct at that demand, how far they will go. The second succession war, round 2 begins. Minnesota tribe, the heroes' last years, the Knight of the Sword, planet hopping is Sunstroke, Arena Kurita, divine sacrifice, Keys and Mystery, Divine Retribution, Marathon Offensive, Early Succession Wars. See, there's so much information. You could do a whole series of videos just breaking each house down by the political moment or time in the history. So the First Succession War, for example, and what takes place between the various houses from the house perspective, each one of those could be a video on their own if you really wanted to go that route. And all my blundering and tongue-twisted ability to provide discourse. All right. We got some introduction, New Millennium, Dragon Renewed, Decline and Fall, Assassination of Real, Military Revival, Halstead Inflation, Jamie Wolf's Dragoons Ride, Attitude Towards Mercenaries. Under the leadership of Takashi Kurita, the Draconis Combine has recently mellowed its attitude toward mech warriors. No longer are units for hire treated as mercenary scum, which was the infamous Jinjiro's term for them. Though this does not mean that the Kurita military gives the mercs any special treatment, it does mean that House Kurita is no longer willing to risk units' ire by openly cheating them. Instead, Kurita prefers to use more subtle company store scam to entangle mercenary units. The recruiting and supervision of mercenaries handled like professional soldiery liaison or PSL, which is under blah blah. And so recent develops gives a little bit of talk of what's going on. This section here, this whole book basically revolves and really goes into depth over what's happening. When enemies unite, internal squabbles, the pillar of gold. Let's see if I skip something because I don't see the entry for the Third Secession War, which is most of what this is. Yeah, I think it just kind of went in from one to the other. Okay, so pillar of gold, the social political structure. So, the sun, earth, gold can melt and form again is still strong. Gold has been considered the most precious of metals since the beginning of civilization. Blah blah blah. Yeah, it's just an entry from one of the Yahoos. The ruler of the House of the ruler of the Draconis Combine is the coordinator. He, and in rare cases she, is all powerful. Although not literally considered divine, he might as well be for the privileges and respect he enjoys. The coordinator is the Draconis Combine encompassed in one person. The coordinator's entire life is the service of the Combine. He's burdened with responsibility for the welfare of the entire system, has no other interest. This combination of the physical embodiment of the spiritual ideal and monistic devotion of the coordinator to his service produces the reverence the people feel for him. People of the Draconis Combine constantly exhorted to serve the dragon and are thus able to focus their energies on a single symbol. Time the ideal came to be expressed as the maxim, serve the coordinator as he serves the Draconis Combine and its people. The coordinator is the hub of the wheel of state, or even more accurately, space at the hub of the wheel. To those with an understanding of coup, a wheel is useless without this space, where the axle goes. Therefore, the space is the wheel. With the coordinator as the Combine's hub, everything comes back to him, everything comes from him. Yet it seems that though he is not even there, or at least is not perceived. The all-powerful coordinator rarely commits any action directly, yet he sees it all through the ISF and pulls the strings. So we talk about the nobility. The nobles are the real movers, the doers in the Combine government. The job is to implement the will of the coordinator. The most powerful figures in running the Draconis Combine are the military commanders. Far behind them in real influence are the ministers, and behind them are the provincial leaders, and then the land or corporation holders. The last are the noble and title, but rarely appear in court. All figures in court, down to even the lowest latrine cleaner, have some kind of title. This is because the coordinator cannot be directly served by or risk coming into an unplanned contact with mere mortals. Higher positions in the court bring high titles, but nobility who only work at the court are seen as curry or leeches. Provide useful context for those wishing to address a general or minister or to attract the attention of the coordinator himself, as they have no real function in the life of society. No matter how well they serve the coordinator, they are leeches. The coordinator can overrule any decision or action by a noble. No one wishes to offend the coordinator, so most of the nobility are circumspect enough to wait until they are sure they have the ruler's approval. A corollary to this is that someone's extreme activity around the court is a sign that he coverts or usurps another's function or is guilty of deliberate fawning, right? Sufferings of the line. So the court rituals, military honors, celebration of heirs' birthdays, celebration of the coordinator's birth, cleansing of the spirit, pageant nobility, privileges. Their wealth and position entitles nobles to material benefits and a few intellectual ones as well. Though the teachings of sufferings of land, the nobles justify their luxurious lifestyle. Most nobles have a substantial wealth either in the form of land holdings or businesses. Those who serve as military leaders or administrators also receive a generous salary from the government. Just as most people with a position of authority have some noble title, so most nobles have some form of official title which allows them to dip their fingers into the government pot. Because of the government controls of commerce, anything a noble wants he can get one way or another. Only concerns are whether obtaining the desired object will create a scandal. Trusted nobles are, for example, allowed to own books and tapes from other states, but had better be able to come up with a good reason why they do. Some may even travel to other states for business or even pleasure, usually disguised as business, as long as they act intensely loyal back home. Nobles often use their influence to help one another, whether it is to procure some rare item or cut through the bureaucracy in a government office. These favors may be performed in exchange for similar favors. Governmental structure. Draconis Combine government, such as it is, gives the apparent autonomy to eventual worlds. In practice, the coordinator makes all major governmental decisions. These are implemented by the military district commanders working through district governors or planetary chairman. A planetary chairman who decides to rule solely as he sees fit will soon be overrun on his world by government troops if he is allowed to live that long. Individual planets frame and enforce their own laws as long as they meet the coordinator's approval. This gives the rulers' individual worlds, the prefecture heads, the ability to solve problems that are unique to their worlds and cuts down on the culture of divisiveness by allowing the semblance of self-rule. This semi-autonomy increases the stature of the military as one united force of the Draconis Combine, both in the public perceptions and the running of the state. There is very little central government structure. Each prefecturate district sends its one representative to the Committee of Planetary Unity, which supposedly sets a unified policy for the Combine. Any resemblance between the Committee of Planetary Unity and a parliament is strictly on paper, however. All right, you get the idea how things pretty much coordinator is the Draconis Combine, and it goes downhill from there. Ministries. There are 5 ministries overseeing day-to-day affairs of the Draconis Combine: Ministry of War, Interior, Treasury, Justice, and Court. Each ministry has responsibilities to different aspects of the Combine. It's never obvious to which ministry covers a specific issue, much less what the bureau and subcommittee of the ministry. Even lifelong members of the bureaucracy, or those who have spent their lives working with or despite the ministries, have a hard time figuring it out. For example, having a tooth pulled might seem to fall under the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Health and Happiness, division of the Ministry of the Interior. First, though, a patient must go through the Treasury to acquire one voucher for the dentistry work and others for any materials that might be necessary to complete the work, one for each category of material. Then, if the individual must take time off from work, he must obtain an excuse from either the Treasury or ministry under which the worker's employer falls, or both. He may then also need an excuse from the local military authority, especially if the individual works in a military industry, as so many do. If travel is involved, the forms are needed from the War, Justice, Treasury, and Interior ministries. Best local, so you get it, right? These people are the ultimate bureaucracy, and it's hard to get anything accomplished, and you got to really work at it. So you got the Interior, War, Justice, Court. So we got the government districts. 5 government districts are analogs to the military districts. The district and prefect names are the same. Borders are generally the same. A few planets are in one military district or another government district. Situation produces only problems for that planet. Between simple bureaucratic mishaps and deliberate sabotage by one prefect against another, everything is hard to accomplish on a split district planet. Each government district is led by a duke, district governor, who works in conjunction with the military commander in charge of the district. Military commander always has the final say, but usually prefers to leave the administrative details to the duke. Individual planets are run by a planetary chairman. So Rasalhague is the government district with the most distinct individual identity. Its separate history taught by many of its schools, ostensibly to show an era of the old ways, also to keep alive the feelings of separateness. The coordinator makes sure that Rasalhague receives the closest scrutiny of all the districts for his once warning of signs of discontent, and the indication that unrest is dealt with swiftly. All right, that's a whole entry unto itself. Then we got, let's see, the district of Rasalhague, the district of Peach is the site of Luthien and most removed from hostile powers, is most economically stable districts, but is also the bearing brunt of relocation and economic buildup. The light of Ganhar Prefecture's resources, Galilean IV, the Benjamin district, back to that, yeah, Benjamin district, the Dairon district, and yeah, we got interstellar relations. Few Draconis travel unless they are part of the military. Those who trade with other successor states are watched carefully for signs of cultural weakness, and they are aware of surveillance. The eyes of the dragon are like a mother watching a child in the street, is how the saying goes. Those who attempt to stray too far from fealty to Kurita and the Dictum Honorium should be thankful for the reminder not to stray and for the chance to return to the dragon's protection. For those who are not grateful, flee to other states and are dead to the Draconian view. So, you don't see a lot of travel by regular Combine people. So we got relations with House Liao, Merrick, Davion, Steiner. Relations between House Kurita and House Davion are almost non-existent. What goes that exists is not applicable. The Draconis Combine has always regarded the Federated Sons as a major nuisance, standing in the way of Kurita rule over known space. Since the recent pact between Kurita, Liao, and Merrick gives Davion's enemies an opportunity to work in concert, the Draconis Combine has been concentrating efforts even more against Davion's space. Pillar Ivory, religion and philosophy. There is a lot of philosophy in House Kurita, and I don't want to say it's convoluted, but it's definitely deep. It blows through every level of society. The Dictum Honorium. The Society of House Kurita is regimental and regimented in many ways stilified. Main desired degree of order among the populace, the Combine leaders depend on that one document, the Dictum Honorium. Is a detailed set of conventions, the first compiled and published by Omni Kurita in 2309 upon the death of her sister Shada. Dictorum contains strict guidelines on procedure for offering, accepting surrender, ways of behaving honorably while in an enemy house, and other related protocols. It is the original reference source for the Draconis Combine for increasingly complex web obligations that circumscribes the lives of everyone from top to bottom. So, original Dictum Honorium, the first keeper, the third keeper, the underground decades, restoration under Shinwen and Martha, controlling the Kai, O5P and the military and ISF. There's various excerpts from the Dictum Honorium. On obligations of the ideal citizen. The highest ideals which the subjects of Lord Kurita can aspire are purity and harmony. By purity is meant freedom from all that might come between the citizen and his duty to his lord and government. By harmony, it is meant to synchronize life, action, and thought to the higher purposes of one's society and one's lord. Right? Then we got relationships and conduct, proper behavior toward enemies, proper behavior of the warrior. On proper behavior toward enemies, the opposing fighter must be presumed to have the same code of death or victory as the Kurita warrior. It would be disrespectful of the enemy to hold him to a lesser standard than we hold ourselves. In the face of the enemy, our objective is to destroy him utterly. There must be no hesitation or lack of resolve in this regard. It is true that fighters from other houses can hold to weaker standards than do the warriors of House Kurita. Nevertheless, we deal with them in battle as we expect to be dealt with ourselves, even though we may not actually deserve this honor. And then say on proper behavior of the warrior. Proper business of the warrior is death. The warrior cannot enter a contest with any thoughts of his own survival. His only concern must be to destroy the enemy or else die in the fighting. Well, much that, like I said, while number 2 in the hierarchy of house power and military power and stuff in the inner sphere, one of the big weaknesses of the Kurita system and its military is this concept. Is so they will fight in a lot of aspects to the death and to the last man instead of retreating or surrendering. That doesn't say that they all do this because it's various levels, but some of the most elite units are vicious SOBs and often can become decimated vicious SOBs because they'll fight beyond the point where they ought to go and retreat. In some aspects, this is one of the things that makes House Kurita so alike to the clans in a lot of aspects, especially the more aggressive clans, is that mindset, that all or nothing mindset. And it's a core belief that's reinforced and reinforced and reinforced to the point where you're almost brainwashed by the idea. So, unaccepting surrender in wartime, and ironically, the behavior for the warrior is a tiny little thing. Accepting, a surrender is almost a quarter of a page, or half a page. Art of the vendetta. Many of the so-called mental particularities of the Japanese have their origins in love of purity. Hi there, Sippy. You can't get on the table. She's our neighbor cat that we let in the house. Yes, I know. You can get up there, but you can't get on the table. Can't have you on the computer. So-called mental particulars of Japanese have their origins love of purity and its complementary hatred of defilement. But pray, how could it be otherwise? Being trained as we actually are to look upon the slights inflicted either on our family honor or the national pride as so many defilements and wounds that could not be cleaned or heal up again. Yet, unless through a thorough washing through vindication, you may consider the classes of vendetta often so met with in public and private life of Japan merely a kind of morning bath for people whom love the cleanliness has become a passion. Said here. In revenge, there's something that satisfies one's sense of justice. Our sense of revenge is as exact as our mathematical faculty, and until both terms of the equation are satisfied, we cannot get over the sense of something left undone. From Anzoln to be Bushido, the soul of Japan, London Terror, 1900. So, assassinations, vendetta lines within the Draconis Combine, vendetta across class lines, vendettas within class, vendetta lines outside the Draconis Combine. This is one of the things that sets the fight between the Wolf Dragoons and elements of the House Kurita, especially the warlord of that district and his minions, such a vicious to the knife concept is because wolves, dragoons are from the clans, and they also understand their version of this mindset very, very deeply. And they understood House Kurita and how it was misused, and how their friends and associates within House Kurita were badly abused and forced to do things because the coordinator, through the coordinator, his minions pushed it, and the coordinator, through his lack of or empathy or his inability to moderate it directly, because he kept trying to control things indirectly through hyperbole, could have put a stop to it, and they should have. And it never. So the fact of those two is not surprising that it was such a blasted bloodfest that and such destruction. Anyway, wisdom of the dragon, dragon's teeth. It's an informal name for the Draconis household guard protecting the incumbent First Lord. Mysticism of the Five. Belief systems of the five classes: the nobility, warriors, middle class, workers, the unproductives. The leaders of Combine want the unproductives, the passively rotting mass in the sump of society, to be drawn into the chinistic superstition in the same way as the workers. The unproductives are a mobile class, however. Some planets they consist of masses of refugees from other places and other classes, etc., etc. It's pretty convoluted. Right here, the workers. The function of working class is that work. The brutal grind of a 16-hour day leaves little time for religious study. Or discussion. The basic principles of every class is Confucian loyalty up to the chain of obligation, with all chains leading to the Lord Kurita. Special religious form assigned to the workers is a Shinastic superstition. The Shinto hierarchy is a family firmly controlled by the nobles, etc., etc. So in minority religions, even in House Kurita, you still have a variety of religions, although they're considered, they're not condoned, they're not necessarily prosecuted either. You got Judaism, they just kept it quiet. If you belong to another belief, you keep it to yourself, if you're smart, because it could cause a lot of problems and a lot of indirect and direct snubbing and intervention necessarily in your bad way, or not to your favor, offhand, sex, etc. What is that? Any society, rigid state control, central religion is found to generate a crop of exotic cults among its fringes. The Draconis Combine is no exception. House Kurita takes its people's ideology seriously and policies of any off-brand religions carefully, if especially severe on any cult that puts up an individual as a guru or prophet, considering this to be a direct challenge to the First Lord. Okay. The Pillars of Steel. The Draconis Combine military. House Kurita is a sign of the dragon. Another foe makes the young soldiers of the other houses quake with such hatred and fear. All of Kurita's space is one military camp. Kurita soldiers and human bringers of death and destruction, according to the accepted teachings of most of the other houses. The awe in which the other armies hold the Draconis Combine military is in itself a source of strength for House Kurita forces. It's a psychological advantage is key in warfare. The Draconis forces sometimes have their victory even before going to the field. This edge, however, seems to be eroding as more commanders on the other succession states learn the truth behind the monolith. All right, Bushido, organization of military units. And all the life of the Draconis Combine revolves around the military, and the military is a smooth fighting machine. It would be seen that House Kurita should have long ago conquered all of human space. However, the same could be said that each successor state in roughly an even matchup of the succession wars. On the other hand, Draconis Combine, with its lack of resources and technology, should have been overrun decades ago. It is a testament to the will of the Draconis people and the discipline and the fighting tactics of its armed forces that the Combine has held up for so long. As of July of 3025, the Draconis Combine can draw upon approximately 80 battle mech regiments, although efforts have been made to gather most up-to-date information, blah, blah. So uniform, senior officers, mech warriors, rank, conventional troops, structure. Military war is divided into many subdivisions, most important being the Draconis Combine mustered soldiery. The warlords of each of the 5 military districts have authority over all the military elements in their district and answer directly to the coordinator. Department of Indoctrination, Bureau of Substitution, Assembly of the Grand Inquisitor, Procurement Department, always the Quartermaster. Warehouses of the Procurement Department are gigantic in some worlds. The entire planet contains nothing but warehouses. Location of these planets are top secret, as a raid against one of them would wreak havoc among the logistics of the DCMS. Just because a unit needs supplies does not necessarily mean it will get them. However, the Procurement Department reviews the unit's loyalty and current battle record to determine if it's worthy to receive supplies. Needless to say, when a unit is on a losing streak, it will get fewer supplies, and the problem snowballs. Of course, the well-placed bribes can circumnavigate this colossal red tape surrounding procurement. However, even the worst house units get supplies before a mercenary unit does. There's little problem with shoddy merchandise of the arm of the dragon. The military gets only the best, leaving the rest for the citizens. The Draconis Combine was second best. The department sets up defense contracts with various corporations to ensure the militaries, or that the firms are working in the best interest of the military. The Draconis Combine Port Authority, Bureau of Administration, Combine Military Coordination, the Draconis Combine Mustard Soldiery, etc. Special Forces is a catch-all for all various kinds of units used for special missions. For one example, Draconis Elite Strike Teams, or DES. This elite corps of commandos are trained in every branch of the military, from piloting a battle mech to piloting a jump jet. Members are used to mainly infiltrate enemy installations. For example, early DES forces stole the blueprints of the first battle mech from the learned Commonwealth. Members of DES force follow the tenets of the ancient ninjas. That is, they practice combat and stealth maneuvers constantly. In addition, like samurai, they will commit suicide rather than be dishonored. I.e., they won't let themselves be captured. So if they're in a losing situation, they'll off themselves, which if you go and take the chance of them later escaping and maybe returning to the Draconis Combine, which of course by doing that would put them under a lot of suspicion, because why did you off yourself in the first place? But this gives us really this all or nothing mindset once again to the elite forces of the House Draconis, or the House Kurita and the Draconis Combine. But it's also a big weakness, because what happens is you lose all these talented, heavily invested, trained in individuals and units when failure does occur, and they do that. So the house suffers in the long run, but to them it's suffering worth it. It's to them it's just acceptable. No chance to redeem yourself. Draconis Combine, Physicians of the Dragon, Combine Support Engineering, Internal Security Forces. Citizens of Draconis Combine rarely mention the Internal Security Service, or ISF, because they all think about it constantly. Responsible for many abductions, killings, and interrogations, the secret police fosters fear, paranoia, and devotion to the state. Those who follow the way of the samurai have little fear from the ISF, however, unless their honor conflicts with the honor of the Draconis Combine. The director of the ISF is Subhatch Eridor, the Smiling One. Eridor is feared perhaps even more than the coordinator himself. Just gives you a bit of insight in here. So we got our picture of the districts and prefecture boundaries of Kurita space as of 3025. Mech units and their deployments. Like I said, if you viewed my review of House Steiner, I don't like the way they laid out the military units. They're just scattered all through the book. I much prefer these to be concentrated. So it just feels better that way in my mind when it comes to reading. Weapons industries, military academies, security institutes and colleges, decorations and military. So here we get into the military units. The Sword of Light regiments. 5 Sword of Light battle mech regiments are the elite of the Draconis Combine. Mustard Soldiery, otherwise DCMS. Every element that makes up the unit, including a choice of personnel and training equipment, is calculated to raise its abilities one step higher, one step better than the typical mech regiment. So these are the best of the best, the elite of their military units. And if you find yourself facing a Sword of Light, you're in for a bad day. You're in for a really bad day. And they don't lose very often. They do lose, and they don't lose gracefully, but they don't retreat very often either. These people will go toe to toe with anybody and do their level best to shit stomp your ass into the ground. Excuse my French. But that's the way it's the truth. District forces, the Darien regulars, Rahu regulars, Regazul regulars, Galadian regulars. These are your standard military line units from the various districts. And the districts from where they originate from does not necessarily mean that's where they're going to be established. Or because, for example, the peace regulars, often are found in all the other districts in support, and especially in offensive operations, because they're from the core of the Draconis Combine and have the least amount of direct responsibility for defending a border. The Peace District is the largest yet of the 5 districts. It has the fewest mech regiments. Without any borders along the Commonwealth or Davion fronts, the Peace Military District sees far less action than other districts. Only a long stretch of the border with the periphery is active in the form of the occasional bandit raid. Otherwise, the Peace District forces involved in more than just a fighting force, because Luthien Draconis Combine capital is located in the Peace District. Peace regulars find themselves taking part more and more in ceremonial events. The ceremonial role has taken the Peace regulars into a show unit. It is now a tradition to keep the mechs of Peace regulars looking at their best. Close order drills for parades is their specialty. Personnel from the Peace regulars also changed, and district forces formed for succession, or Peace regulars were normal regiments manned by mech warriors with no special qualification. As time wore on, more and more mech warriors died in the wars. Those survived near regiment age became important because of their experience. It was decided these veterans would be transferred to the Peace regulars once they reached a certain age. In this way, they could serve out the rest of their careers in relatively low chance of dying. DCMS began sending many of its recent graduates of various mech warrior academies to the Peace regulars to serve under and learn from these veterans. Today, most Peace regular commanders are officers who have served at least 15 years in frontline units, with Green warriors serving under them. Though this mixture seldom creates a good mech unit, it does make good mech warriors of the rookies. Studies have shown that a young mech warrior stands 25% better chance of surviving his first year on the front if he at least first served in the Peace regulars. Yeah. And we got free-floating regiments. Draconis Combine military uses the term free-floating regiment to describe units without a set region of responsibility. The free-floaters expect to be ready to move and move fast from wherever they're needed. To this end, free-floaters usually have their own drop ships and dump ships. There's a prejudice in the Draconis military against the free-floaters. While they admire the skills of better units, many feel the free-floaters are a little better than mercenaries. So you get the Procurement hussars among the elite among the free-floating regiments. The Legion of Vega, which is the other end of the spectrum, the Dregs of the DCMS, the Night Stalkers, which is kind of an oddball unit created by a forcibly retired mech warrior. The 2 units were gained with quite a reputation. When Colonel Lloyd McGavin would retire because of his age and wounds, he felt he had plenty of years of fighting still in him, and he got permission to start basically a mercenary unit that's a house operated mercenary unit that stays within the house. Zhangzhou Academy, Cater, and these are entire regiments of cadets that will go into the field, and that's how they get a lot of their experiences, hands-on fighting. The Antane Legions, the Aquamark Militia, and others. Strengths and weaknesses. Draconis Combine is the second largest armed force of all the successor states after the Federated Sons. The Combine also allots a greater percentage of economic resources to the military than any other successor state. Kurita House troops are known for their discipline and their devotion to their leaders. Indeed, all of Kurita society is based on unswerving loyalty. Many of the weaknesses of the Draconis Combine lie within its strengths. For example, loyalty and devotion have produced a fighting force notorious for its lack of innovative techniques. The Kurita fighting style is wild and fierce because the Kurita technical philosophy is often throw everything we've got at them and stomp till they stop moving. This does not leave much room for maneuver around an enemy's surprise tactics. It's also an impractical method for a state with limited resources. Extensive emphasis on loyalty can also lead to rampant paranoia, backstabbing, and track covering. Too often, the military leaders are more concerned with making themselves look good and their fellow officers look bad than with their jobs. In a realm that charged with fear of disloyalty, few are willing to stand out from the crowd, even to display skill and talent. Devotion to leaders means no initiative from the lower ranks. For example, if a Dracona commander is killed, no man will step forward to lead the troops. Rivalry between service branches and among military districts are also handicaps for fighting forces. Yeah, that happens quite a bit. So the multiple forces from multiple districts and free floaters converge on a particular location or theater of war or defense or whatever, and then they're supposed to conduct what's in the best interest of the House Kurita and the Draconis Combine. But it's not unheard of for one set of commanders and units to conveniently be late to the party or to misconstrue a directive and find himself out of position if it allows not the loss of the battle, but for their opposing or their quote allied units from the other district to kick the worst of the pounding from the enemy. It's all much better, right? So in this case, it goes. The limited Kurita production always results in great imbalance of trade. They import many goods, both basic and luxury, but export very little anybody wants. Whenever the House Kurita can generate is almost invariably poured down the military spending hole. The Combine is wearing out its resources, but not exploring in any way of increasing resources except through conquest. It's possible that the economic situation worsens. The Kurita's fighting spirit of the Kuritan soldier will become even more desperate. It's also possible that the Kurita empire will collapse on itself in a paroxysm of social and economic chaos. You know, every house seems to be one step away from collapse and failure, depending on how you want to look at it. So we got the pillar of the daily life and culture of the house, the Draconis people. The people of the Draconis Combine may be among the most contented of all the successor states, not because their daily life is particularly pleasant, but because theirs is a collective identity based on shared vision of society. This vision gives purpose and meaning to their lives. Draconis people believe that their coordinated rules by divine right and that their own place in the scheme of things is part of the same divine plan. Each person has his duty to the order and gives transcendent quality to each existence, no matter how Spartan. Thus, collective prevents the ordinated people from missing the luxury, leisure, or essential pleasures that are generally lacking from their lives. Codes of conduct, structure of society, militarism, exophobia, xenophobia, right? They don't get along well with other people from other houses, and part it's because that's what they're indoctrinated to do. Education, distinct features. Although House Kurita has borrowed wildly from other systems, the education system includes several distinctive features. First of these is primary education compulsory for all children, while secondary higher education is reserved only for a select few. It means the majority of children first school age do get rudimentary education, so literacy is almost universal. First school age begins at 4 and lasts until age 10. During the last year, each child must face a battery of tough achievement aptitude tests. Only about 60% will pass these exams, and that is intentional. The rest end up working in the labor force, where you don't need skilled labor, or you can learn on the job. Universities and other higher learning institutions, non-Japanese culture, and Draconis Combine. Although the general Kurita culture is closely based on here in Japan, the majority of the Combine citizens are not Japanese ancestry, especially on planets where non-Japanese people predominate. There are definite strands of other cultures discernible. The official Kurita tolerance for foreign cultures varies. At this time, under Jasmine, Kurita's advocacy of the arts, multicultural study and display is actually encouraged. Right, so it goes on more deep the variation, but it just goes to show you that it's not all one thing. You don't have the entire German mindset run the House Steiner. You don't have the British French mindset running the Federated Commonwealth. It doesn't dominate. You don't have that Japanese ancestry mind. So the entire population of the Draconis Combine, the lion's share of them are not descendants from Japan. It's just the way the society plays out and is accepted. Social problems, large life, pillars of date, economics. Say the Draconis government controls the economic system is almost redundant. As the coordinator controls the nobles, military, and every aspect of life, he is the government. House Kurita is not a wealthy state, and as its size and importance might suggest, many of its rules are actually resource poor, having been settled for purposes of exploiting only one or two mineral or crops. Other worlds have been hard hit by the succession wars, many of them victims to the philosophy of destroying the planet in order to save it. The disruption of interstellar transit has also seriously affected many Combine worlds unable to grow their own food, and now find themselves cut off from needed supplies. The Kurita government has been evacuating these planets slowly as quickly as possible, with so many large ships being requisitioned by the military. However, the operation's economic relocation program are haphazard at best. Kurita government frequently keeps worlds capable of producing bountiful crops and worlds with intact industrial bases at artificially high population levels. Delight to the eye. So we talk about in other houses the same. The military and commercial transport capabilities of House Kurita is on the lower end of the 5 houses. This is also one of their unspoken weaknesses. They do not have a large privately owned merchant fleet pool to pull upon, because for the most part, majority of the transport jump ships, the jump ships used in House Kurita are owned by the state or a select group of corporations and nobles. And so they do have a production, just like every house. They are producing a limited number. Another side effect is that they have a larger than average pool of smaller drum ships. So the merchant class and the scout class are quite predominant. The store lords are also fairly available, but this limits the amount of ships and merchant material that can be moved around at a time, and it also makes it a little tougher to keep the economy flowing from some planets. So it's not uncommon for some planets to be totally independent on, or dependent on their own means and resources. So we've got military ends, conversation and waste, corporate structure. Says, although the Kurita economy is government-run, it is by no means a communist economy. It can be best described as controlled market capitalism. New businesses can start up only with permission of the government, must be run under close government supervision. The corporations are not owned by the government, however, and have their own directors and may issue stock if they wish. There is a tolerance for small operations on most worlds, such as independent farmers markets. If they become too successful, they're usually closed down or absorbed by a larger firm. Ownership of corporation equivalent to land holding in terms of noble prestige and power, etc., etc. So we go important corporations, merchants, trade. To in the Draconis Combine, production distribution of materials and goods is still highly specialized in specific worlds. Too few worlds are totally self-sufficient, which means much effort must go into transporting materials around the Combine. There have been some improvements. Majority of industries rely on one raw material or on plants producing that material, for example. Production is still slow in most places, however. Any Draconis citizen who can afford to buy consumer goods usually prefer imports over fairly shoddy Combine versions. Working class people are encouraged to keep possessions to a minimum, not only because of the high prices and small living spaces, but although a cultural ethic that disapproves of accumulating wealthy items. It helps if you got a poor people to imbue in them this austere mindset, so they don't feel as poor as they really are, and they don't feel deprived of something if they're not expected to have something. If you're not expected to have a house full of tchotchkes like the average American, you're not going to be disappointed by not having that pile of stuff, says the person in the room full of boxes of stuff and wipes accumulated. Never mind. Interstellar trade. Kurita consumer goods are not in high enough caliber to market around the galaxy, but the government connected merchants, Draconis Combine, have no qualms about trading in materials and goods sorely needed even by the military if they need ready cash. For example, the compelling Confederation has some plasteel available for purchase. The Combine traders will sell, say, mech armor to the Free Worlds League in order to get C-bills for the plasteel, without considering the long-term need for the mech armor. Part of this reason for such careless funding is that the percentage of such sale will go to the broker. Kurita's recent treaty with Houses Liao and Merrick have opened trade amongst these three houses, giving such trade open official sanction of bestowing most favored nation status on one number. Pity is how little each world has to offer the other. Right? Back to that. One of their big weaknesses is the lack of resources and a slowly diminishing resource pool and a kind of a shoddy, at best, commercial industry, manufacturing base. So, it's a good thing you don't want to have a bunch of fancy, flashy stuff, because you're going to have to buy from some other houses, industries. Strengths and weaknesses. Greatest strength of the Draconis Combine is people. Combine citizens devoted to their society and are coordinated in a deep, unquestioning way that any other head of the state would envy. All Combine citizens also have a serious sense of their inner place with the grand scheme of life. Rather than spending time trying to get ahead by raising their social status, Kurita workers strive to show honor by finding the best way to do any job they are given. The loyalty and production levels of Draconis workers are like those of Draconis soldiers, are amazing to the residents of other states. The general population also accepts a standard of living that is adequate, although rarely more than that. One mind, one purpose. The ultimate economic weaknesses of the Draconis Combine are its lack of resources, policy of wholehearted commitments to the military, to the detriment of new production and work in the private sector. Nobility is also sometimes a problem, with their cautiousness holding up progress and their underhanded backstabbing and court intrigues distracting them from necessary work. Middle-class military nobles, all of whom are exposed to influences from outside the Combine, may also be susceptible to a dangerous form of materialism. Trade and luxury sometimes threatens to distract traders from their clever negotiations for necessary raw goods, because they can so easily move luxury items in the Combine. There has been an upturn in the Combine inflation rate in the last few years, etc. So we get into sections of personality. Takashi Kurita, the coordinator, his wife Jasmine, their son Theodore, and that picture does not do that poor fellow justice. Subhash Eridor, the director of the ISF, Constance Kurita, Takashi's sister and the keeper of the family honor, Vasily Chekarov, the warlord, the Knight of the Dragon. Once again, here's a nice, Russian era individual of Russian descent in charge of their military, who is not Japanese. I'm just saying that not to. Just saying. Ivan Sorensen and Greg Samaroff. This fella here is the problem, the big problem that caused the Wolf Dragon, the big problem with Wolf's Dragoons, ends up costing him his life at the end of the day. I think it either cost him his life, or he ran and hid, and they're out there still hunting him down. I don't remember. Various other individuals and relatives, the Kuritas and their trusted flunkies and whatever. It brings us to our atlas, a good selection of worlds. Second in size of Federated Suns, the Draconis Combine is more than 145 by 140 parsecs wide. Inside this vast realm are trillions of people, each with his own racial and cultural heritage. Approximately 350 inhabited planets are within the Draconis Combine. This chapter presents only a small glimpse. So, 350 accepted settled systems. Like I said, probably twice that many when you act mining colonies and outposts and things like this. But in the grand scheme of things, it's on the small side. House Liao has a fifth the size of the territory that the House Draconis has, but has 400 settled planets within that small space. So the space between the Kurita's settled planets are much wider. So potentially jump time is much greater. So moving material from one system to another system some distance away could take multiple jumps. In some cases, jumps at systems that are not settled. So because you can only make a maximum of a 30 light year jump at a time. So it is what it is. Various planets, and like I said, a selection of different places and their back information on them, stats and things like that. Nice pull-out map for House Kurita and the Draconis Combine. Just a slight bigger version of the color one that's in the front. So there we have House Kurita and the Draconis Combine. We all have a great weekend, friends.